So, if you've been a part of this channel for a bit, you would probably know that I wasn't exactly a big fan of Secrets of Mana. There were things I liked about it, but overall the game kinda left a sour taste in my mouth. I felt like it didn't age very well, and I didn't hold back my thoughts on it. There were some people who didn't exactly like that. We had some conversations, and on one hand it was kind of funny to see people write 10-paragraph long sentences about how I fucking suck at the game and I'm basically just the next DSP. Admittedly, it did start to get a little out of control with some. So I decided for the best to take a small break from the series to let the heat die down, worked on my 1K special, went on vacation to a lake house with my family, and now I'm back to this series with another game as I've finally beaten Trials of Mana. And I ended up really enjoying it. Not perfect, mind you, but I liked it a lot more than I did Secrets. Hell, I think I like it more than Final Fantasy Adventure, and I had a lot of praises about that game. But that begs the question, what makes this game better than what came before it? And what exactly does it do wrong? Well, how about I quit my yapping and get into it? I'm Crimson Rosso, and welcome to my review of Trials of Mana. As most of my videos do, let's get into the pros of this game before we talk about the cons. To start things off, let's get into visuals, because this game looks fucking amazing. Now, the Mana series has never been a slouch when it comes to the pretty department. As much as I complained about Secrets of Mana, that game does look damn beautiful through and through. And Trials of Mana is able to top what came before it due to its increased level of detail. Now, I could easily go onto a tangent here about all the things that have improved in the visuals department. Things like increased character detail, much more emphasis on settings and areas, way more movement of the models. So many things I could just spend literal minutes to hours discussing and gushing about. But instead, I'm just going to put a visual of Secrets of Mana on the left, and then put a visual of Trials of Mana on the right. And that's just going to be perfect visual quality for how much they've improved. Yeah, looks pretty damn good now, right? Fucking insane to think about how much they improved upon it with the same system. Really goes to show just how good Square was back in the day on improving its own 2D graphics. Kinda shame we never really got this game in the West until the collection came out, because I really would have liked to see the general consensus about it. At the same time, it does kinda make me wonder what would have happened if we never tried to expand past 2D pixel art for games. Would Trials of Mana become the standard for the next evolution of art, or would that be something like Star Ocean or Final Fantasy Tactics? Or would pre-rendered graphics like Super Mario RPG or Donkey Kong Country be the next step forward? I don't know, but that's an interesting thing to think about. Although that'll probably be for another time. For now, let's leave the talk about graphics behind and talk about this other game's major improvement, and that is easily its gameplay. Now, I've made it very clear that I did not like the gameplay of Secrets of Mana in the slightest. It had cool ideas, it had pretty cool ideas, but I think it was executed in a way that made the entire game a nightmare to go through. Thankfully, I did not have that problem with this game in the slightest, as not only did this game do the smartest idea imaginable by ditching that stupid stamina percentage mechanic in favor of a more traditional action RPG, but the amount of tweaks to the gameplay and additional mechanics made it feel a lot more balanced, and overall, way more enjoyable to experience. One of the best changes to this game's formula, though, was that magic was much more balanced. Instead of just turning it into, if you know the weakness, the boss fights are over in a minute machine, magic is now a more viable option that no longer trivializes any encounter. In exchange for the spells costing less, they're now given a charge time to compensate, and they don't one-shot basically anything, even at higher levels. I like this a lot more as it makes using the spells a lot more of an active strategy in battle. They do more damage than just swinging your weapon, but they come with the fact that they now take a little bit of time to call out. I think it's a nice change in comparison to them just being the broken win button they were before. Another cool addition was the introduction of special moves. Depending on one of the 6 characters you pick the game, yes, there are now 6 different characters, you get up to 3 in a party out of the 6 you can pick from, and they all have a special move that you build up through hitting enemies with your attacks. And once you build it up to max, you can press the B button and do a super attack that does far more damage than your normal moveset. And as you progress through the game and unlock more class changes, yes, this game has a job system, we'll get to that in a minute, they can upgrade your special moves that, while they now take longer to reach max strength, they do way more damage as a result. These ended up being one of my favorite additions to the game, as it was a really cool way to just see how much your characters had improved in the late game by launching this super powerful attack. Also, I really like that in this game, even if you do get the later class changes, you can still just keep your original 2 charge-up attacks, so you never have to feel like you have to fill it up to completely max to use your ultimate hit. If you want, you can just use your 2 weaker ones. I like that they don't rip away that option. Instead, just going, alright, yeah, you've unlocked these abilities, you can keep them. Instead of just going, well, now you have to get this boost instead of the other 2 ones. It adds more depth to gameplay and makes every encounter a lot more engaging. It also pairs quite well with jobs. And since we're on the topic of them, I want to talk about the system in this game because I think it's pretty good. Now, the job system in this game is actually very similar to Fire Emblem's job system, the early ones, not the later ones, where you're given a choice between 1 of 2 jobs to pick from, and that'll be the basis of what your character will learn going forward. There are 2 separate paths for each character. You can have them either go down the light path or the dark path, and depending on which one you pick, not only will you gain a different overworld super move, but the spells you learn change as well. Example of this is with Duran the Swordsman. If you choose the light path and make him a knight, and then later on a liege like I did, you gain access to light spells that are healing abilities. However, if you chose the fighter and then gladiator class, instead of healing spells, you gain access to saber skills, which basically function as elemental buffs that let your weapons deal more damage and gain weakness hits. Because of this, class changes become a very integral part of how you build your party. Do you want a party of all light users, or do you want one character to go the dark path so you have some more variety? Or maybe everyone should go the dark path, and you focus on dealing damage more than healing or status boosts. This mechanic also helps encouraging replayability, as maybe in one playthrough you want to try out the knight class, and then in the other playthrough you want to give the fighter class a chance. Or maybe you just ran through it with these 3 characters and now you want to do it with 3 other ones to see what their classes are. It leads the game to have this really cool amount of mixing and matching potential for whatever one you're going for. Not to say that the gameplay itself is flawless, mind you, I do have a couple of issues, but overall, I think it's a very fun system in a very good game. And that's really all I have to say about gameplay, so let's get on to the story and characters. They're both pretty solid overall. They're also tied to one of the more unique aspects of Trials. What makes Trials of Mana so unique in comparison to the 2 games before it is that instead of following their flow of having one singular story, Trials instead focuses on 6 different stories that all interconnect. Every party member you can pick in this game has their own narrative that they start off by themselves, and as the game goes on, they end up meeting the other party members. The other 2 being the other party members you chose at the start to join your team down the line, while the others just kind of go off to do their own thing. It's kind of similar to another game I've talked about on this channel called Live Alive, with the difference of it being instead of just them all being in different time periods and meeting up at the final level, all of the stories happen at the same time and they meet up at the very start. In fact, a really cool aspect of this is depending on who you pick as your main character, not only is their story different, but the final dungeon and boss fights change too. An example of this is if you pick someone like, let's say, Duran as your main character, like I did. The final dungeon becomes the Crystal Desert, alongside having the Dragon Maw dungeon, and the final battle is against the giant dragon. But if you chose Rice as your main character, the final dungeon becomes the Jungle Visions and then the Mirage Palace, with the final boss being a giant demon. Hell, adding on to this, depending on who you pick as your main character, or even one of your party members, you will get some extra cutscenes depending on who's in your party, like beating the Dusk Knight at the Dragon Maw dungeon with Duran in your party as you get a few extra scenes. I love that. In my personal opinion, this is one of the best ways to get someone to replay your title. Stuff like this is just really good at incentivizing people like me and very much other gamers to want to do this again. Props to you, Square Team, you did good. Of course, all of this is elevated due to just how good the soundtrack is. Composed by the returning musical artist Hiroki Kikuta, the man once again brings to life a beautiful OST tied to a video game. But this time the game was actually good. Tracks like Witchmaker, Ancient Dolphin, and Damn 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 are all fantastic in their own right, but my absolute favorite is Angel's Fear to Tread. Such a bewitching melody that tickles my eardrums every time I hear it. Go listen to that track right now, and you will have happiness particles in your brain go up to 11 million. And that's it for my pros. Feels nice to being back to having a lot of positive things to say about a Mana game. But with every set of pros, there's some cons, so let's get into talking about those. So, to just start things off, I'm going to say this right here and now. If you're watching this because you subbed to me for my Secrets of Mana review, first off, thank you for subscribing to me. That means a lot. That video was the whole reason I was able to hit 1K. But if you were expecting that kind of insult fest for this one, that's not going to happen in the slightest. Because I genuinely loved a lot of this game. However, I do have some complaints. Skipping over the visual section for this part because, well, I really have zero complaints for how this game looks. It all is very, very pretty. So let's just get into my complaints about gameplay instead. Now, unlike Secrets of Mana, where the game's gameplay just genuinely made me angry and not like it, there was a ton to enjoy here. And my complaints for this game are mostly minor nitpicks to mild annoyances. For one, in combat, I'm not a huge fan of the change of the movement. So in Trials of Mana, they introduced this new movement style that whenever you're in battle, you do this little shuffle thing instead of just fully running around like you do in Secrets. And I'm guessing it was added to make the fights feel a bit more immersive or maybe make battles a little more difficult. In reality though, this is one of the more annoying changes they made because now instead of just being able to skip fights whenever you wanted, you are basically just forced into this stupid slow movement system that doesn't disappear until you either leave the room or defeat all of the enemies, which can be a total pain in the ass whenever you're just trying to get through certain levels. I think the perfect example of this is in the Dragon Maw dungeon at the very end of the game. You have to go through a lot of rooms a lot of times, and since I didn't know my way around there because I wasn't really using a guide, I kept having to go back into rooms with enemies and getting forced into that stupid sliding movement instead of just leaving and continue exploring. It's one of those mechanics where at the start it doesn't seem like it's going to be much of a problem, but by the end game you're just really sick of it and wish they didn't add it in. Another complaint I had for the gameplay actually has to do with the class systems themselves. Now I like the ability to change classes, and I think it does make this game a lot more fun. But if I could name any gripes with it, I would have to say that I wish the game would give me more of an explanation about what each class does. And I'm not asking for the game to tell me every spell or skill that I'm going to learn. No. I love learning new skills that I don't know about, and that would make the game way too handholdy. But at the very least, I would have liked a small little description about what classes do. Because if you're playing this game blind, it's just a fucking coin flip if you're going to get the class change you want. Like, if you wanted more healing spells and you didn't know anything about the class system and you were playing with Duran, you better know that the Knight class is the only way to get healing spells, because if not, you're kind of fucked. I think a good example that they could have used is something like Fire Emblem Sacred Stones would have been nice to see, where once you give someone a class change, it gives you a basic couple of sentences about what you can expect from the class, and that's kind of just all I really wanted. Again, it's not a major downside, but it is kind of annoying. Okay, was there anything else? Oh yeah, first couple of hours of this game, get ready for bosses to feel kind of on the spongy side. Once you get your class changes, that starts disappearing bit by bit, but prepare for every fight all the way up to, I'd say, the Jewel Eater to feel like they're twice as long as they need to be. Other than that, I got no more complaints, so let's get into my final thoughts. You know, after I had finished Secrets, I was always a little worried that I wasn't really going to enjoy Trials. But now that I've played it and beat it, I'm very happy to say that I think this game was great. It was a blast to play through, even if I did have a couple issues with it, and it kind of makes me bummed that we never really got this in the West officially, as until the collection at least, you couldn't really play this without, you know, sailing the 7 seas. But I do believe if it had come over, this game would have been a fucking classic. Alongside becoming the de facto Mana game people pointed to for the Super Nintendo era instead of that bum-ass Secrets. And that's why I have absolutely no problem giving this game a very well-earned 8 out of 10. And that is the end of the video, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry this one took a little longer to come out. I'll try to get the next one out faster. Hell, the script's almost done, if that's any consolation. And if you liked what you saw here and want to see more, make sure to like and sub down below, leave a comment if you want to help me out in the algorithm, or if you're just up for a chat. And if you want to hang out with me or the rest of my awesome community, don't be afraid to go follow my Twitch or join my Discord. Hell, hit up my Patreon if you want access to some ad-free videos with a small price of $1. That's all, folks. Have a lovely day, and I'll see you next time for more RPG content.